Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to this week's podcast. As you know, I'm really super passionate about helping women to be empowered by money, own their story, and take control of their financial future. And today I'm so excited because I'm joined by the wonderful Kim Uzzell. And Kim's a financial coach and mentor. But the thing I love her about her most is she's also a chartered wealth manager. She's got over 30 years career experience in helping a lot of people get the best out of their money and their money mindset. I know you work a lot with women now because obviously there's a big gender gap between the wealth and investments. And you and I share that really passionately. I know I got started with some of these conversations because I saw that horrible statistic that 1 in 4 women were going to be in poverty in retirement. And because they're not investing, they're not doing things. And I saw one of your stats, which I absolutely love on your website, which was 55% of women still don't feel in the UK financially self-sufficient. So welcome, Kim, to this podcast. It's great to have you here. And your dog's saying good day to us at the same time. Good morning. Are you going to put the dog out? No, he's coming. He's going to stay with us. Let's talk to the dog at the same time.
The postman has chosen 2 minutes into our podcast to make
This is the joys of being live, ladies. We love this. It makes it real. This is what the work-life balance is all about now. Working from home is the dog saying hello to the postie. Right, Kim. Do you want to say good morning? Tell us just a little bit about yourself. Hopefully I've got a good intro, but tell us a bit about yourself just so that we know where you're coming from.
Well, good morning from me and from Honey, the crazy Cocker Spaniel. It's one of the things that I think we've all got a little bit more tolerant over the last 3 or 4 years about children and pets. And, you know, we often see cats sort of walking across the keyboard and the screen nowadays, don't we? So, yeah, Honey is very much part of my working life. So, you know, apologies for that. But yes, I have been working with people and various aspects of their money for, you know, over 3 decades. So this is something that is genuinely my life's work. And one of the things that we've seen over that time is some really big shifts in the way that women earn and are able to pursue careers, and we have opportunities available to us that our mothers and our grandmothers didn't have. And we're taking all of those things and we're pushing through, and we're having families and careers, and we're making massive sacrifices, and we're building, you know, bigger salaries, and we think that we're really independent. But actually, we're not really doing, generally speaking, a great deal with our money other than spend it. We still have those very nurturing sides to us. So if we have children, our salaries are the things that generally pay for the school uniforms, the school trips, the school lunch money, the trips out, the birthday parties that they go to. All of those expenses come out of our disposable income. So we're contributing to our household bills, we're paying our mortgages. If we're a single parent, we are doing all of that. We're not even having anybody contributing to it, and we're doing really, really well. And then we've got this additional expense, which means that we're not putting money into our savings, we're not putting into money into our future freedom funds, we're not topping up our pensions. If we're self-employed, we're putting money into our employees' pension funds, but we're not putting it into our own because we don't have an obligation to do so. We have an obligation to put money into pension funds for the people who work for us, but nobody makes us do it for ourselves. So we are always putting other people first, whether that's our children, whether that's our employees. And that means that we're working harder and harder, and we're building businesses, and we're climbing career ladders, and then we're still getting to the end of our career, or when we want to be reaping the rewards, and suddenly finding that actually we haven't got as much there as we thought we might have. So what are our options then? We have to keep working, or we have to cut back on our dreams, and neither of those things are ideal. So we need to get these conversations started much earlier, and to not only say to women, think about your future as well as your present, but also to say to men, you need to encourage this. You need to encourage independence. You need to, if you're a financial advisor, a male financial advisor, you need to be talking in a different language to your female clients, because they've got the wealth coming in, but they've also got a completely different set of emotional attachments to it and nurturing sides of it that your male clients probably don't have. I'm not saying it's a blanket black and white thing,
Yep.
but the conversations need to be appropriate, and they need to dig a little deeper, and they need to be a little broader. And then we can start using all of this money that we are building, creating, earning, inheriting, whatever it might be, to create a phenomenal future for us and for the next generation, and leave our legacy in more ways than simply just paying for childcare and school uniform.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it brings up two big things for me. It's funny, I was talking to someone the other day and I said to him, I feel like we're going to be in this little bit of this lottery syndrome type thing for women at the moment, where there's some incredible women earning amazing money. It's like you said, we've got into the entrepreneurial spirit. There's lots of people I know, especially in the online space, making millions. And I still don't see them investing. It's like you said, I still don't see them talking about the long-term plan. And so for me, it feels a little bit like the lottery syndrome. Even when we do get it, we're not going to keep it, and we're going to give it all away anyway, and then we're going to have nothing to show for it. So I think you've hit the nail on the head of how I was describing it the other day. I think that, it is like you said, we're naturally nurturers. And someone said to me the other day, I looked at my own journey and I was like, I've been a multi-six-figure earner for a long time in the fact of, even when I was at a career, I was on six figures. And what have I got to show for it? Do you know what I mean? I haven't got as much as I expected to show for it when I hit 50. And I think that's really, really interesting. And that's kind of why I started Iconic Wealth, was to have these conversations, because it's like you said, it all starts from a conversation. I was talking to a lady the other day that, 6 years she's just come out of her marriage. She's got nothing to show for it whatsoever. She's broke. She's got 2 kids now to look after. They're in a horrible divorce. She's coming out the other side. And she said, I was earning through it and I've got nothing to show for it. Whereas even if she'd started something where she just invested 50 quid a month or just put some money aside, she'd have a pot of money now to work with. So what do you think is the biggest reason that kind of stops women taking that first step, stops them taking the first step to either creating some sort of financial independence or even investing?
I think when it comes to financial independence, we always think that we're actually okay because we're earning. We feel financially independent because that was what our mother's definition of it would have been.
Yeah,
you've got independent means, you've got independent money coming in. You don't have to rely on somebody else because you've got a salary. But of course, you're not independent because you're relying on that salary, or you're not independent because you're still relying on those clients to keep coming and paying. You're only really independent when you've got that money aside that can keep paying you even when you've stopped working. So there are lots of times in my life, and especially after my divorce, where I felt really independent, but actually I wasn't. So, we've got to have these conversations with ourselves over what independence really means. So when I went through my divorce, I just turned 40. I had loads of debt that I had taken from the relationship. Mm-hmm. I had to give up my pension fund as part of the divorce process that was handed over to my ex-husband in its entirety because he had no pension at all. Wow. And I bought him out of the house. So I increased the mortgage and, all of those things that you do. And I felt incredibly independent because I had a job that allowed me to keep on top of all of those things and to keep feeding the children and we had our first holiday, me and the children, post separation was on Tesco club card vouchers. We saved our Tesco club card vouchers and did a whole week of theme parks and low cost hotels through club card. And I still felt incredibly independent because we were able to do that. So at that time, I was telling myself over and over again how amazing it was that I had my financial independence. And part of me still refers back to that. Well, of course, I've always been independent. I've shown that I'm independent. I've shown this and I've shown this. But it's not the case, because I need to work. I need to bring clients in. I need to do things in order to keep a stream of money coming in. And so I'm not truly as independent as I might think, but somebody else would look at me and go, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
She is the epitome of financial independence for women.
Yeah, I love that. And I think
define it. You have to define it and be really quite sort of critical in a way in order to get where you want to be going forward. So I think sometimes we coast because we are more independent than our grandmothers were, or we're independent when we go through a divorce, and we're sort of like flying those flags and, you know, cheerleading each other on. And so we think that's enough. But of course it isn't, because, you know, for those who, you know, receive maintenance, that maintenance will stop. You know, they are actually relying on somebody else to pay for a chunk of their money, or, you know, at some point the salary will stop because you do want to retire, or at some point your relationship may break down and you've suddenly got to fund 100% of everything rather than 50% of everything. And there's lots of things that we need to think about, and we need to talk about them. And it's not asking for doom and gloom and expect the worst to happen. It's just facing facts. The facts of life are that these things happen, and we want to have as many choices as possible. So that's the important bit.
And for me, there's still a bit of an education gap as well. I think that, you know, it's like you said, we haven't talked about this sort of thing for a long time, and there's more and more conversations starting to happen. You know, I know various podcasts popping up around these types of topics, various communities now popping up about these types of topics, which is great because it's going to empower women to have the conversations. But again, I think that quite often what I see, especially, is I see that women think differently quite often to men around these types of things. Like you said, we're still nurturers. We still give everything away. We still like to help other people first before we'll help ourselves. We see it as there's a guilt or a shame to wanting to do it. So how do we work through that? Like, how do we work through this kind of different mentality to go, you know, even with businesses? You know, I was talking to someone the other day around businesses, and you know, I've set up a business that I want to sell in 3 years' time. And she was like, oh, you're going to sell it? And I went, well, yeah, that's why I built it. Like, this is why I'm doing it. And they're like, but isn't it your baby? And it's like, no, my business is not my baby. My business is my retirement plan. So it's that different thinking in relation to how do we switch some of the kind of, I guess, shame, guilt of wanting money and being okay with it. How do we kind of shift some of that thinking in relation to kind of the women coming through at the moment?
I think we need to first of all acknowledge that we are different. You know, that we do have elements that are inbuilt as women that we can't change, but neither actually we don't want to. And this is one of the things that being a stockbroker was a very male dominated environment, especially when I started in the sort of 80s and 90s. And, you know, there was this big push to, you know, women should have it all, or women can have it all. And it's actually, but we don't necessarily want it all. So I think that there are important things that we need to look at what we do and what we want and our family set up, and, you know, whether we have children or we want to help our grandchildren out or whatever, and to actually say that's okay. It is okay to want to be that nurturer. It is okay to want to split our time between being a mother and a career woman, or being a mother and a businesswoman. It's all right to do that. Nobody is saying that you've got to be the same as everybody else, that you've got to have that same drive and those same decision making abilities as your male partner or your male colleague or your brother, because we are different. And that's really important, that we are different, we are individuals. But that also means that we need to work out where each of those things have the most leverage for our future. And that means we need to talk about these things earlier and earlier and earlier. And of course, school is one of those places that that we can start these conversations. What do you want out of your future? What do you What do you want? I was working with some year 10s at our village school a couple of weeks ago, and the entrepreneurial spirit of these 14 and 15-year-olds was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Boys and girls. But of course, they were different in what they were wanting to do and what they were wanting to achieve. But the important thing is that those things need to be nurtured. They need to be spoken about. And that may not fit into the standard curriculum. I know that one of the boys that I was talking to was probably labelled a bit of a troublemaker. But it wasn't that he's a troublemaker, it's that his skills and his attention needs to be diverted into the thing that's going to create. And it's the same for all of us. And having those conversations with the girls in the class, in those business studies classes, to say, it's not about a side hustle. It's not about just providing you with a little bit of money, unless that's what you choose it to be. It's about you deciding what you want, what fits in with your dreams, your visions, your family plans, your desire to travel the world, and then going and achieving it, and having those conversations as early as possible, so that we don't get put in a box that we then find difficult to get out of. You shouldn't do this, you can't do that. You've got to put the children first. And that's where the shame and the guilt comes in, is when other people start saying, and I remember very, very clearly, I went back to work after having my first child. I didn't take maternity leave, I was straight back into the office. And one of the partners of the firm that I worked at said, I don't know why you girls have children if you don't intend staying at home with them.
Oh, I probably would have decked him.
Even worse,
my God, that's horrific.
Even worse, he was a family lawyer.
No way.
And it's like, immediately you feel that sort of like guilt, shame. I mean, it's hard enough as it is.
I was going to say, because you're already feeling that anyway. Yeah. To then come in and have someone tell you that.
I had hormones, leaking milk every time I thought of the baby that I'd left with a nanny at home or whatever.
You got your own guilt.
And you have all of this going on, and it's hard enough as it is. And you've already, deprived of sleep with sleepless nights, and you're doing a really good job just making sure that you've got your office attire on the right way round and you're looking pretty presentable for your clients. And then somebody says, but why aren't you at home? Why did you have children if you didn't want to be with them? And that shame and that guilt of being a career person as well as being a mother then hits you. And that's really difficult. So we need to have these conversations in every area of our life to say, no, it's not a case of you should do this. It's like, well, you choose to do that. I choose to do this.
Yeah, I don't think anyone should tell anyone else. Should. I think it's a terrible word. Yeah.
And we've just got to be more open in these conversations and say, well, okay, it's fine. You do it your way. I'll do it my way. It's much better for my children to have a happy mother who's building a business and then comes home and spends quality time with their children, rather than a mother who's at home 24 hours a day, who's desperate to actually get out and use her brain and her skills.
Yeah.
And who ends up just screaming and being stressed and is a complete alcoholic by the time the child is 4 months old. It's choice. It's choice and conversation around choice. That's where true independence, and we often talk about what's financial freedom and what does wealth mean, but it's the ability to have those choices. And if you want to be a stay-at-home mum, that's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. I will not criticize anybody for making that decision.
No.
But if you are, then start thinking about how you're going to fund your future going forwards. Who are you currently relying on? What are you currently relying on? Is it benefits? Is it a partner? Is it an inheritance? What, a trust fund? It could be absolutely anything. Is it income from a property that you've got elsewhere? And just feel secure, not just for today, but for your future. And if you don't feel secure, then we need to have a conversation about how you can feel secure.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's like you said, it is just starting to think outside the box a bit, isn't it? We're in a very, what's the word, gratuitous society where we want everything yesterday. You know, we're very short-term focused. We want this bit now, and we want it yesterday, or we want it overnight. And, you know, for me, I think the biggest shift in conversation, and even around people's businesses that I have all the time, is like, you know, you're great, you're focused on this bit, but you're not focusing on the long-term goal. You're not doing the activities that are going to get you the long-term goal. And I think that's, for me, is where the conversation is great. We're earning income, brilliant, but think about your long-term goal. Think about that plan, the legacy, that not even the legacy really, just your own security in that future. And what steps are you taking to get there? And I think, you know, that's where the education piece comes in. It's like, you know, I talk to a lot of people, they go, but I don't know what to do. What do I do for that? And they still shy away from, whether it's, like I said, whether it's investing in a property, whether it's putting into an investment fund, you know, they just still don't quite know what to do sometimes. So, but I really love that. And I think that, you know, we touched on this before in relation to, you know, we're coasting along. And I was definitely like that. So I really want to kind of tap into that, because, you know, when I was in the corporate space, I was in sales, I was earning loads of money, but I was cruising, you know, I was making lots of money. And then I was just like, wasn't really investing it, wasn't thinking about where I was going. You know, I'd bought a property and stuff like that, but that was it. I'd done nothing else. And I look now and go, oh my God, that would have set me up for life. So how do we get out of this coasting, especially when we're in these really uncertain times? Like, you know, there is still massive uncertainty out there at the moment in relation to where things are going. There's massive changes in costs and the associated costs in relation to, you know, basic things like mortgages, food, everything like that. So how do we kind of tap into those types of conversations at the moment? What do we need to do differently to plan for our retirement and create that financial freedom?
I think, first of all, we have to recognise that the last 10 years of really low interest rates have not been the norm. Now, if you look back prior to the banking crisis of 2008, 2009, interest rates were above where they are now for as long as we can remember. And at times they have been incredibly high.
Oh God,
So,
I remember mine in Australia was 25%, I think, when we first got our first mortgage ever.
my
I
first mortgage
laughed at these ones.
16%. I remember celebrating when I got a fixed rate at 8.5%. Well, now, you know, 8.5% is still, you know, a fear, you know, factor for a lot of people. And that's an ideal example of where we have been coasting. We've had the benefit of low interest rates, and we have coasted. Now, for those of us that have previously experienced high interest rates, part of us is still saying, well, it's okay, because I know that, you know, this is not normal, and I know that this is a little window of opportunity, and you know, I know that they're going to go back up, but hopefully they're not going to go back up to what they were in 1988 and 1989 or whatever it was, the time we bought our first house. However, for the generation below us, you know, my daughter is 29. Her first mortgage comes to she had a 5-year fixed rate mortgage, which comes to an end in October. Now, she's only known, as have all of her peers, anybody who's taken out a mortgage in their 20s or 30s has only known interest rates at next to zero. They have been coasting because people haven't talked about what happens when interest rates go up. When interest rates went up from 0.5% to 1%, it wasn't a 0.5% increase. It was 100% increase. But the education around this is not great enough. You know, we're not saying when you take out a mortgage, there's a little tiny piece that says, can you afford it if it goes up? And everybody goes, oh yeah, I can, because I want to have the house now. I want to have the house now. And the reality was they didn't really believe that it would really go up. You know, they expected it to stay where it was because it had been there for a few years, and it was like that was what they thought was normal. But we have much more responsibility to say, but this is not normal, and at some point it is going to rise, and you need to be ready for it. So although we can't turn the clock back and have those conversations that we should have been having, or that building societies and banks should have been having, or mortgage advisors should have been having a few years back. What we can do for those people who are in that situation now is to learn from it and to say to, their friends, their family, their children, this is something that caught us out. And I want to make sure that A, it doesn't catch us out again, but B, it doesn't catch you out in the future. So let's talk about how you can get through and not coast. And that 10-year period of really low interest rates is a prime example of where we do just coast along. Or if we've got a recurring income coming in, whether that's from a property, we get used to that. We sort of take it for granted that that capital will be paid.
Yeah.
And so we spend it, mentally at least, probably physically, we spend that income because we expect it to come in. But what happens if something happens to that tenant? What happens if life throws that tenant a curveball? What happens if that tenant is unable to pay? Are you ready for that? Are you prepared for that? Have you got, provision for insurance to cover that? What happens if the tenant dies? It's not a conversation we like to have, but that could mean that all of a sudden you've got no income coming in. The thing that you've been coasting along with, that lovely drip feeding every month of rental income, happy days, I'm really independent. You're not, you're relying on your tenant. Are you okay if that tenant can't pay? What's your plan B? Let's talk about our plan B and talk about the what ifs a bit more than we have been, and learn from the things that have caught us out. If you've been caught out by interest rates, if you've been caught out by a 0% credit card that you thought you'd be able to pay everything off, but you weren't quite able to, and now it's at 35%. What are the lessons that you've learned that you can now share with other people without feeling shameful about it or embarrassed about it, but actually use it as an education piece?
I love that. I think so. What are a couple of the things? So, if you're in that situation at the moment, so what sort of things should people be thinking about? Should they have like a fund available to them? Like, what's some of the practical things that they could be doing if they think that's going to happen? So, what should they be doing now?
So, we need to spread our assets across a number of asset classes, because if you are solely in property, for example, and you need to raise money, or something happens and you need to get your hands on extra money, selling a property takes time. If you want to get the right price for your property, selling it takes time. And if you've got a tenant in it, it's potentially going to take even longer. You can't just shave a little bit off that property and sell a bedroom quickly and get a quick injection of cash. So, I've seen lots of people who focus everything on building a property portfolio as their capital appreciation and income flow. And that's fine as long as you've got something else as well.
Yep.
So we mustn't ever look at just one thing. So putting money into the stock market, into funds, into stocks and shares is great for the longer term. But if you have a crash that can happen at any time, not just because of an economic cycle, but you can have a crash that comes for, COVID was a prime example. We didn't expect that 40% drop in global markets overnight. We also didn't know how long it would take to recover afterwards, because it was an unknown. It was probably the biggest uncertainty that we've been faced with. But it's not just COVID. If we look back over the last 20 years or so, when the planes hit the Twin Towers in 2001, markets didn't expect that. Nobody expected it.
Plummeted overnight.
And literally, Wall Street was wiped out.
Yeah.
And the markets took a long time to recover. In 2011 or 2012, I can never remember which one it is, there was an earthquake and a tsunami in Japan that threatened to break up the Fukushima nuclear reactor. Now, the markets literally tumbled 30% over fear. And when it was then ascertained that the reactor wasn't going to break up and cause this huge global issue, it recovered again. But we didn't know that at the time, and we couldn't have predicted. Markets couldn't have predicted. I'm sure the seismologists said, oh, we knew that was coming. But the market response was very, very quick to drop. So if you've put all of your money into markets for a short term, that's everything that I've got, and that's my safety net as well. And you need to then take your money out on the day of the earthquake, the day of the terror attack, or the day that there's a global pandemic announced, then you're going to be really disappointed. You're going to be really fed up. You may well get back less than you put in. It was all right last week, but it's not all right this week. So it's great having a stock market portfolio. It's something that I would encourage everybody to think about doing, because that's what I've done for my whole life. But you also need to have plan B. So whatever you've got, whether you're heavily in cash, heavily in stocks, heavily in property, what is your plan B? Because even if you're in cash, if you've put that into a 2-year fixed rate bond to take advantage of the rising interest rates, what happens if you need to get money out in 6 months' time? You know,
pay big penalties, don't you?
You get out. You know, some are there to say, well, you can take out some, but there's a penalty. That's okay.
Yeah, others don't let you take it out at all, do they?
No. Have it to the end. The only way you can have it is if you die. It's no good to you then. So even if you're in cash, look at where your cash is and say, but what's my plan B? We've always got to have a plan B. So property, stocks and shares, cryptocurrency, which is obviously incredibly volatile. Foreign exchange, again, it can be very volatile. Spread your risk and always look and say, what is my plan B? For those real moments, not the cyclical things that we think we can predict. Things like property always have cycles. We know that. Economic environments always have cycles. We go out of recession, we come into recession, we go out of it, we come back into it. We know those things. But what about the unknowns? What about the things that are completely random? But also, what about the things that could be completely random in your life? We might think we're happily married, but what if we're not? We might think that we're fit and healthy, but what if we're not? We might think that we're going to go on forever, but actually, what if we're not? And so it's the realities of life and investing that we need to be looking at and talking about more, so that we can enjoy them more. It's not a case of then saying, oh, I can't do this because I might die tomorrow.
We're not going into doom and gloom here.
What we're doing is having these conversations so that we can actually feel more secure about our future. And we can go and enjoy it more, knowing that even if something catches us out, it's okay, we can take it in our stride because we've got a safety net there.
And it's also taking away, like you said, some of the fear around it, because one of the things I had, because obviously that I'm not married and and so everyone talks about being a single parent, whatever else, but just when you're single, it's like, well, I don't have any, if my family go, I don't have any other family, I don't have any kids coming through, who's going to look after me when I'm old? So I had a massive fear around my financial future. Like, I was like, well, no one's going to look after me when I want to get into a nursing home, or I want to do, I want to be looked after in the future. And so I had a big fear around that. And I think for me, the thing that made it non-fearful was sitting there doing a planning session to go, okay, well, what do I need if something happens? And I'd never, ever sat down and done that. And I sat down and went, okay, well, this is what I'd need to live on. This is what I need to cover it, whatever. And I was like, okay, now I've got a plan to get it in place to take that whole fear away of my financial future for my retirement. And I think sometimes that's the thing, when we're aware of it and we're having these conversations, it takes fear around it, but it also means you can enjoy life more now. It's like you said, it's about more bringing some of that retirement even into today. Like, what are you holding back for a rainy day that you should actually be doing now? And how can you factor that into your life instead? So I really, really love that. I think that, it's like I said, you and I want to empower more women to have these types of conversations, because it all starts with conversations first, doesn't it? It makes it the norm. I did an article recently with Money and Finance magazine. We were talking about the jargon in the industry, and they were talking about, but you have to change the jargon. I went, no, you don't. The jargon's not going to change. What you have to do is change the delivery of it. It's like you said, how do women want to be exposed to it? How are they going to learn from it? How do they absorb that into their own life? So it's the way it gets delivered that needs to change. And, I love everything that you're doing, because you're empowering women to do that. You're empowering them to take control and have these types of conversations. So what's been your biggest, I guess, we all talk about, creating this, and obviously, you're an expert in what you do. You've helped so many other people. What's been your one big challenge for yourself? What was the one thing you had to work through? I was really curious.
Ooh. So my biggest challenge, and I've spoken about this, I used to hide away from it massively, because it was a great shame for me, great fear thing for me, and that was that I was brilliant as a stockbroker and wealth manager, looking after other people's money.
Yep.
People could come to me with millions, and I would invest it for them. Pension funds, charities, individuals, trust funds. Yeah, give me your money and I'll make more money from it. And then, sort of out of my 9 to 5, I had this absolutely toxic relationship with money. And I had this really serious hidden amount of debt that, jointly with my ex-husband, we were both in that together. And the two were obviously poles apart. And so trying to be somebody at work, knowing that actually at home is somebody else, it was being like Jekyll and Hyde. I would make phenomenal decisions at work around money that were very, very good. And then I would get home and worry about how I was going to make that next loan payment, credit card payment, not tap, we didn't do tapping back in the day, but if I wrote a check, was it going to bounce, or whatever. That real difference between where I was, or where I was professionally, and where I was personally. And there was always that fear: was it going to be found out? Was I an imposter? How could this possibly be happening? I knew what I should be able to do, but I couldn't do it. Did that make me a failure? Was I a bad stockbroker? Was I a bad mother? Was I a bad person? Was I, all of those things? That living that dual life was massive, because I could never talk about it. Everybody thought,
because it would have broken you professionally, wouldn't it? Yeah.
And so I didn't talk about it, and eventually one of the things that we were doing, we were both trying to fix a marriage that couldn't be fixed by spending. If we have a bigger house, it'll be okay. If we have another child, it'll be okay. If we buy a boat, it'll be okay. If we do this, it'll be okay.
Distractions. Yeah.
And those are the things that then caused us to overextend. We were trying to fix something that essentially it can be fixed. Now, of course, eventually, after 25 years, we went our separate ways, and then we could start to each repair the financial damage that we had each done. So it's we both took responsibility for that.
Yeah.
But it was still a massive area of stress and concern and shame and embarrassment and manipulation, the little lies that you sort of tell your friends when you back out of social things at the last minute because you really can't afford the petrol to get to the event or whatever. So you make excuses. Oh, one of the children's sick, or the car wouldn't start in the winter, or something like that. Last minute things. And they're all lies and manipulation that you don't feel good about saying, but it is a protection element.
Yeah.
But that was a massive challenge for me. But what I've realized now, since I've left my corporate world, and since I've focused heavily on this coaching side, this mentoring and this discussion piece around money more, is that I was not the only one. I thought that I was the only one in that situation, but actually there are so many people at the top of their career earning big salaries, making big decisions with other people's money or other people's businesses, or they could be corporate lawyers, they could be they're phenomenal at looking after other people's money, and they are still struggling themselves, because what we do in our professional lives is based on knowledge and experience and logic. We don't bring our emotion into it. We don't bring our money stories into that. Whereas with our own money, whether it's a fiver or £500,000 or £5 million, immediately we have all of those money stories, that emotion, that what we should do, what would mum do with it, what would great Uncle Bob say if he knew that I'd just got this money, what nobody from my school gets this sort of money, so why should I have it? All of those things come into play, which they don't. You don't sit with clients' money and say, oh, well, I went to this school, so I can't possibly, do this.
No, you're just doing your job, aren't you? Yeah.
Your job, and you do it really well, and you do it with pride, and you do it with all of that sort of, drive and passion that you have for the job. But what we have emotionally is what drives our individual spending. And that could be really positive, it could be really negative. And for me, it was really negative. And I didn't understand that. I just felt that I was this massive failure because I could do it at work. Why can't I do it at home?
Yep. And you can't talk about it. So it's like you said, it was just bubbling up underneath all that time.
So now I encourage the conversation. And I do talk about that period of my life where it was really, really dark. It was really dark because we felt alone. We really did feel that we were the only ones that were in that position. So now I encourage other people to talk about it. I go into workplaces, I do keynote speaking about the fact that it's still tough at the top. You can be brilliant at it, just the same way as you can have a brilliant heart surgeon who eats too many pies and has quite high cholesterol. It doesn't stop him from being a brilliant heart surgeon. He will sit and tell his patients, don't drink this, don't eat that, do some more exercise.
Yeah.
But he's not doing it himself.
You always remind me when you walk past the hospitals and you watch them all stand outside smoking, you're like, really? When they go back inside and tell everyone else not to,
they know what they should do. They know the facts.
They're human on the outside.
They know the benefits, but they've also got what is it that drives them to smoke? What is the stress that's going on in their lives that drives them to reach for that? That fix. And it's opening those conversations to say we're none of us perfect, and we are actually not just one person. We aren't just a surgeon, we are also a dad and a husband and a keen rugby player or whatever. We're not just stockbrokers, but we are also mums and wives and people who have insecurities. We're not just business owners, we are also this person, that person, the other person. And that's really important to talk about more, because I didn't talk about it and it nearly finished me off. And so many other people are holding back from those conversations because they feel that fear that they'll be judged, that they'll be seen as a failure, that they might lose their job, that they might, and the truth is that they probably won't be seen as a failure, because the person that they're talking to may well have been in that situation too, to some extent or another. Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it? When you open up these conversations, you quite often realize you're not alone. And I think, especially in the online space for me, it's all the persona, isn't it? It's the social media persona where you think everyone's doing really well. We were just talking about it, weren't we? It's like sometimes you feel like someone's doing exceptionally well, and then you hear what they're going through and you're like, it's actually not really happening underneath. And I think that, there's always a bit of that bravado going on. And I think that the more safe spaces you can create to have these types of conversations, the better. And I really, really love that. And I know that, I want to kind of mention a couple of things. So obviously you are in our book. So you are in the Iconic Wealth Women book, guys. If you haven't got the book yet, it's out. Kim wrote, I think probably one of the most inspiring story chapters, I think, in that book. I really loved it because it was like, when I asked people to put it together, there was no real direction around what wanted to come out. I just wanted to hear personally what your story was. And I love that you talk about role models and responsibilities and going back into your journey and your story. So if you haven't grabbed the book yet, go and read Kim's story around her grandmother and all the family kind of culture. But I think, and you carried that through into your work, and this is what I love around where your journey is at the moment, is you're carrying that in to become a role model for people around you and the kids at school and changing these types of conversations. So I guess from a practical perspective, tell us what's 2 or 3 things, if we're in that situation, maybe we're feeling a little bit of that shame, maybe we're sitting there going, oh, am I alone? What's a couple of practical things that someone could start doing today to kind of go, okay, how do I take those first steps? What can I do to maybe change my situation?
Find somebody to talk to. Now, ideally, that's going to be somebody that you know.
Mm-hmm.
because you've got that immediate support and rapport that you can do. So if you've got a friend, or if you've got a family member, or your other half, or your mum, or if there's somebody that that you can sit and talk to, it might feel immediately like the hardest, most squeamish conversation that you've had, but actually it will very quickly become a really productive conversation, because it's somebody that you know and that you trust. They will be able to give you the benefit of their support, what they already know about you, that sort of thing. If you haven't got that person, or you don't feel comfortable in having that conversation with them just yet, go and find somebody that you don't know. And that's one of the areas that the internet has become a place that we can talk behind a username. We can talk with our camera off. We don't have to say who we are. And that was one of the things for me when when we're going back nearly 20 years now, when I was in my pit of despair and I didn't believe that I could talk to anybody, I went on to Martin Lewis's moneysavingexpert.com. He had a forum that was with a board called Debt Free Diaries. And I became addicted to Debt Free Diaries. I could have a username. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't have to say where I lived. I didn't have to say what I did.
Brilliant.
And I could every single day talk. I mean, it wasn't a place of victimhood, of everybody going, oh, poor me, my debt's bigger than your debt. It was that place where actually I could realize that I wasn't on my own. And there were people there to challenge me, and there were people there to support me, and I was able to support other people, and we shared ideas, and we celebrated when we paid off a credit card, and all of those things. And we became a community. And actually, I am still really good friends with a number of those people that I met on that part of my journey 20 years ago. I've been on holiday with some, I've been out drinking, we're now through the debt-free stuff, and we're sort of through into a different chapter of our lives. But if I hadn't had that there, I don't know what I would have done. So being able to have that anonymous place. So there was always somebody who you can get support from, or you can outpour to, whether it's somebody you know or somebody you don't. Or use your bank. They are all being trained more now, not perfectly, but more than in the past, to have those conversations with you. So if you are struggling, pick up the phone, get on the online chat on your banking app or whatever, and say,
I'm struggling.
I don't want to have this conversation. And don't be afraid to say, this is the most terrifying thing that I've ever said, but I've got to say it. Or I don't, bear with me because I might burst into tears. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, confused, afraid, but just have that conversation with somebody. And the second time you have it, you'll feel much better, because you can bet your bottom dollar that by the end of the first conversation, whether it's online with that person or whatever, you will feel this massive sense of relief.
Yeah.
So, whether that's that you're in a sticky situation with your tenants and you don't know how to handle it, doesn't mean that you've got to have this big amount of debt like I used to have. It could be that you don't know how to handle a situation, or that you might be facing redundancy at work, or you're thinking about stepping away from your business. It might be that you've lost the love for it and you want an exit plan, and you're worried about what people might think, or how do you navigate that, or what do you do with it? Having a conversation is going to be your best first thing to do with somebody, even if it's not with the person that you live with, or that you share your life with, or whatever. You might not be ready for that bit. Go and find somebody else online, at a networking event, through your banking app, or use your contacts. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, you've got loads of people in your network. If you're on LinkedIn, you've got loads of professionals in your network. Who is there that you can speak to, that you trust, that is going to be confidential, but that can give you that bit of support, so that you don't have to go through it alone.
Yeah, I love that. I think, I mean, I've had a couple of difficult conversations over the years when, I got called out with a property deal that went wrong when I sold my property, and I got ripped off by the freeholder when I was selling, who tried to back charge me something for the previous owner had done. And I nearly got a CCJ on it. And I was like, what's that? I didn't even know what they were, because I was coming from Australia to here. And I was like, what the hell is that? And the bank screwed me over because they were meant to have paid it and they didn't. And then I ended up getting the CCJ. But when I showed them what had happened and we did it, I think it ended up getting it erased. But again, that immediate fear of like, who do I talk to? Where do I get the advice? Like, I think, and then when I realized when I stepped out and did it, it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Is quite often with these types of conversations, we build this massive fear up around them. We build the shame up around them. And actually, most of the time, and like you said, I think definitely with banks and lenders and things like that now, they're much better trained at it than what they used to be. And they're there to try and find a solution. I think that's the thing. They know that the market's changed. They know people are going through different things. And their goal is to help you try and find a solution that works for you. I've had it when I had a loan payment, 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. And I just got stuck at the time. It was cash flow in my business. I was like, what do I do? I just got on the phone to them and we managed to drop 2 monthly payments. Brilliant. Thanks very much. And I picked it up the month after. So again, I think sometimes having these conversations is really, really powerful, really important. So Kim, you've been amazing. I always love your story. I love your essence around money and wealth, because I think that you bring it from a very humility point of view, but also a very clever point of view in relation to kind of what you can do and the things that can obviously build long-term wealth. One of the questions I always ask on this podcast is, if there was one tip now around building your wealth, what would it be?
Just do it.
Oh, I like that.
Just make a start. It's never too early. It's never too late. There's never such thing as too little. Never think, oh, it's only £25 a month. Or, it's not worth cancelling that because it's only. Think about the cumulative effect of that. If you save £25 a month or invest £25 a month for the next 10 years, what could that give you? If you don't do it, it's going to give you nothing. Obviously, the sooner we start, the better. But even if we're well into our 50s, 60s, 70s, it's still not too late to be thinking about our future. And one of the things I've often had is women in their 50s saying, I've left it too late. There's no point in me doing anything now.
Oh, I hate the sound of that. Yeah.
But if you were coming to me at 25 and you knew that you were going to get run over by a bus when you were 55, you stop doing things now, knowing that in 30 years you're going to be dead.
No,
you wouldn't. You'd make the most of it, and you'd make sure that you've got the best 30 years that you could possibly have. So if you're coming to me at 55, you're probably going to live until you're in your mid-80s. You can still do something to make those best 30 years for you and your future. So it's never too late.
No,
never too late.
I love that. And I think it's funny, this is what I love about the Iconic Wealth community, because there's so many inspiring stories around there with women that have changed their life very much over the age of 40 and very quickly. And I think that's the other thing is, like you said, I think once you make the decision to do something, it starts to come out, it starts to flow, and surrounding yourself with people that are doing it is so important. So, I'm going to bang on about my own community, but that's why we're doing what we're doing in the community, because again, you get surrounded by people that have changed their lives. I know a girl that, like you said, she rebuilt her whole life after 40, and in 4 years, she's completely transformed her life. And she said, I can't believe I was paying a debt literally 4 years ago that I wasn't surviving in, and now I'm earning thousands. So, whatever you do, there is, like you said, when's always a best time to plant a tree is like today, if not yesterday, if not today. And it's exactly the same with your wealth. It's to really think about it, is take that first initial step. And like I always say, get around the community, come and join us in the community, because that's what we're here for. You meet incredible people like Kim, is like there's people there and surrounded by amazing people that are doing this sort of thing for you. And if I'm not sure when this podcast is coming out, I should know that when the release date is. If it's before or after, hopefully you joined us at the Iconic Wealth for Women event in London. We're having our first conference on the 14th of September. So make sure, again, you come and spend the day with us, be inspired. find out these wealth tips, look at the things that you can do in relation to changing or transforming, or even just planning better for your future. Even if, like you said, you're coasting at the moment, we don't want to do doom and gloom. We don't want to think about the worst thing, but things happen. So make sure that you are kind of taking into account that. So Kim, is there anything last parting that you'd like to share? How do we get in contact with you? What's the best way? Have you got anything going on at the moment that we should know about specifically?
Okay, so the two big things that I've got going on is, one is I'm raising the bar in terms of financial trauma awareness. So that's a big area that we don't talk about enough. Another area we don't talk about enough, because money mindset is money mindset, but sometimes it goes much deeper with our money stories, and we're carrying generational and societal and cultural traumas that we're not dealing with because we're not talking about them. So if money trauma and working with people to get beyond that floats your boat, then please come and find me on LinkedIn or on Facebook, or look at my website, mymoneymovement.co.uk, and come and get involved in that, so that we can leave that legacy in a positive way rather than a negative way going forwards. If you want to do something in terms of building your own wealth and just bettering your financial relationship with money and actually taking action, those baby steps, those ongoing mindset shifts and all of that sort of stuff, then come and join me in the Wealth Hive. So that's my monthly membership. It's very low cost, very affordable, very high value, and it's all about just making more of your relationship with money in a way that you can see it in your bank account or in your the debt reduction, whichever aspect you're coming at, there's going to be more there. So again, come and find me on LinkedIn.
I love the
or
brand,
Facebook.
the Wealth Hive.
The Wealth Hive.
It's so cute too. It's lovely. It's love it.
There's loads of we're buzzing type, things going on, and it's all about setting your honeypot goals and tasting the sweet taste of success, and all of those things. But it's making a change by doing something.
Yeah.
So doing something will get you somewhere. Doing nothing is going to get you absolutely nowhere, except looking back going, oh, should have done something. And we've had enough of that. So we want to take action and do things to move us forward to get whatever our goals are. So come and find me, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I am all over the place.
Brilliant, lovely. And there'll be links around this podcast. Obviously, we make sure we promote so that you can get in touch very, very easily. Kim, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure having you part of the book and having you part of the journey. Can't wait to see you speak at the event. I know you're going to give an incredible session at the event as one of our keynote speakers. And also remember, there's panel discussions. So there's panel discussions where you get to ask these questions. So remember, one of the things we say is no question is a stupid question. That's why we create these communities, is to start conversations. So join us. Can't wait. There'll be links around this podcast, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much.